I'm fairly certain that a wise person once said, the best bike you can buy is the bike that you can ride every day. So this is my Canyon Endurace CF SL8. So it's 2022, and when you can get hold of them, there are more bikes than ever in the market, each one claiming to be the fastest, the stiffest, the most compliant, the most aerodynamic, the lightest, the best value. But sometimes the old ones are the best ones, and I'd like to show you why I think that this bike is just as good, if not better, than the modern day equivalents. But that said, I'm wrong a lot of the time, so let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. So this bike started its life as a pretty much off-the-shelf Canyon Endurace. It had Ultegra 6870 Di2, it had DT Swiss RR21 die-cut wheels. It's an extra large frame and it was in a grey and blue colour. And back at the end of 2016, it cost me £2,000, which back then was a huge amount of money for me to spend on a bike, and it still is. But nowadays, we know that the bike market is absolutely crazy, and £2,000 doesn't really get you much bike anymore. It was my second road bike and the first carbon frame road bike I'd owned, and I remember taking delivery of it in September 2016 and then not riding it until the spring of 2017 because I didn't want to get it dirty. Oh, how times change. So since then, I've used this bike for all different disciplines and various locations across the world. To name but a few, I've took it to Mallorca a couple of times on training camps. It's been to France for the Haute Route Alps and the Etape du Tour. I took it to Hawaii. I've raced it in crits. I've raced it on hill climbs. I ride it in chain gangs. I've rode it in the Peak District. I very nearly rode it at the National 12-Hour Time Trial Championships a couple of years ago. Basically, this bike has done everything. I reckon I've done well in excess of 20,000 miles on this bike. That's not a flex, it's taken me a few years. So anyway, here's a few reasons why I think this is the best bike that money can buy. Firstly, comfort. Now this bike has a split seat post, and this is absolutely brilliant. So when you sit on it, it flexes a little bit. When you hit any bumps, it just soaks up that road buzz. You don't notice it once you're used to it. When I ride a bike that doesn't have this seat post, I think, oh, why is that so stiff? But then when I go back to this bike, it's like, oh, it's weird again. But within an hour or two, you get used to it, and it really does soak up the road buzz. And that's pretty much the same for the rest of the frame as well. I find it does soak up the bumps really well and is a real pleasure to ride. Because it is the bike that Canyon designed to cater for its endurance riders, the geometry is also quite relaxed, meaning that it's quite upright at the front end. Now I've measured this versus my air road. It's not actually a huge amount higher, but it's just enough to make it feel like a lot more of a comfortable ride. I have taken all the stem spacers out, so it's a bit lower than it was out the factory, but even still, it is really comfy. So the performance, probably equally as important as the comfort. This bike came with an Ultegra Di2 group set, and the chain set was a 50-34, so a compact chain set, and it came with an 11-32 cassette, and that was really important to me. I was just starting my road cycling journey then. I needed a range of gears that would get me up hills, and that is still the case. I have since changed it to a 52-36, but I probably could still ride a 50-34. The weight of it, now it might look like a heavy bike with the way that I ride it, but this bike with bottle cages, with pedals, and with a computer mount is spot on 7 kilos. And that is crazy. That's super light. Obviously it's only a couple of 100 grams above the UCI minimum weight limit. And I'm pretty sure if I was to get some carbon bars for it and some lighter wheels, that it would be, 6.5-ish kilos. So that is really competitive. A lot of modern day bikes are 8 kilos plus, aren't they, with disc brakes? So yeah, I really enjoy that. Particularly because I live in Derbyshire in the UK and it's very hilly. It doesn't matter about the extra weight that I'm carrying. YouTube for doing this. Now, when I bought this bike, this wasn't a thing for me. I wasn't a weirdo that picked a camera up. Or I was a weirdo, I just didn't pick a camera up. But the frame is big enough and wide enough that I can fit a frame bag in it, and that means that I can take a drone out with me, I can put camera batches in, a camera, all sorts. I've got a stem GoPro mount on the stem so it can see the data on a computer. I can get footage of chain gangs, of group rides and so on. It's just so versatile and really helps me create content when I'm out on the road. Maintenance and reliability. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say nothing has ever gone wrong with it, because plenty has gone wrong with this bike. But whenever things have gone wrong, I found it really easy to work on. It's just like no frills. The bottom bracket is a press fit BB86, which is very common. The brakes are a standard mount and they're there, you can see them. They're not one hidden away near the bottom bracket. There's not one nestled away inside a fork cowling or something. They're just there, it's easy to work on. It's also got standard quick release skewers, which are really easy to use. I don't have to take an Allen key with me or anything. Just makes working on it so much easier, and working on it I have. Now at 6 years old, I've changed a lot of components on this bike. It's a bit like Trigger's broom in honesty.
I've maintained it for 20 years. This old broom has had 17 new heads and 14 new handles in its time.
The most obvious change is probably the colour. I had it repainted a couple of years ago in Vauxhall's Arden Blue. Now this did void the warranty from Canyon, but I figured that I'd have my money's worth out of it already. One of the main complaints of buying big bikes or an extra large bike is that the bars are really wide. Just because you're tall doesn't mean you're wide, so it came with 44cm bars. I pretty much almost instantly swapped these for 40s, I think. And then the cyclists amongst us have probably been sick in their mouth already at the sight of those clip-on tri-bars. The reason is I do time trials, I do triathlons. Having clip-on bars on this bike really helps me train for those things, and with it just having standard round bars and being able to clip them on, it's a big benefit to me. It's also somewhere else to have a bag to contain snacks. So when I was putting this video together, I've sat down and totted up a brief list of wear and tear that I've gone through after riding this bike for about 20,000 miles, and there's a lot. I've gone through 3 sets of wheels on this bike. Now one, I fully wore out, aluminium wheels I wore through the brake track, that was brilliant. I then had a set of carbon wheels which aren't really right for me with the sort of riding I do and my physique, and I'm now more recently using some Prime Attacker wheels. In honesty, I wanted some Zero AR30s, but they're out of stock last year and I needed some wheels. But they're mid-range, they're about 1,400 grams, they're about 300 pounds, so it fits in with the, the build of the bike and perfect mark for my needs. A few group set related issues. I've gone through 2 Di2 batteries, both broken, 2 Di2 rear mechs, one I broke by having it wedged into the rear wheel, and one packed up working. Around 4 sets of chain rings. You'll notice that the ones that are on there currently don't quite match up with the crank. The reason for that is it's an Ultegra 6800 crank and 6700 chain rings. I found the chain rings cheap last year or so. When they've worn out, I'll get some that fit. And then the things that I really can't keep a track of: brake pads, brake cables, tyres, chains, bottom brackets, headset bearings. I use this bike in all conditions, and any bike would need those components replacing, so that's not really a complaint. There are, however, a few things that I either don't like or am planning to change. I don't really like that there's a 1 1/4 inch steerer. That means that the steerer tubes are slightly thicker diameter than what is considered normal. Most bikes have 1 1/8. Just means that finding a stem, if you want to change the stem length, is a little bit more difficult. I have just gone back to clincher tyres after a period of time on tubeless. I don't want to open this can of worms, but tubeless on a training bike for me just hasn't worked. Maybe I've been unlucky, but it just doesn't work. And then the crank set. I mentioned this earlier, the chain rings aren't quite aesthetically pleasing. Now they work for the time being. I'll probably use them for this year until they're worn out. But at that point, I think I might change the crank. The bike, I think, looks newer than it actually is because of the paint job, but the crank set sort of gives it away. The rear mech and the shifters are harder to spot. So I think when those chain rings are worn out, I'll probably swap the chain set for a more up-to-date Shimano model. Although I am tempted to keep an eye out for a SRAM Ready Tactile 11 speed group set. I do have it on another bike and I really enjoy it. But we'll see what the Facebook Marketplace has to say. So there we go. The best bike I've ever owned, and in my opinion, the best bike money can buy. And I will hopefully continue to ride for a long time to come. But please do let me know in the comments down below what your best bike money can buy is. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock.